If you'd like to, welcome. You can introduce yourselves. Yes, you can do chat applause. And you can also start thinking about questions that you might like to ask this beautiful team of people who is here tonight is where we're going to get started. So my panelists, I'm going to pick Kat first, just to give you the heads up, Kat, to introduce yourself. And then if you can popcorn to one another, and if you all can introduce yourselves, you may share your pronouns. Please share with our attendees what your role was in pandemic, and also something that was impactful to you. And there's no right or wrong answer to that in terms of the whole entire process or a moment from the play itself. So I'm going to popcorn it over to Kat Ramirez, who is our director. Kat, take it away.
Hello, hi, I'm Kat. I use they and she pronouns interchangeably. As Mindy was saying, I was the director for this piece. There was a lot that really moved me on this process. It was really special to find something that felt so artistically rich and meaningful and just like joyful in this time and like all the contexts that we're dealing with. And I think like what I'm thinking about, the first thing that stuck out to me was just reading this play, which is so incredibly relevant and so intelligent, being like, I don't know how an 11th grader wrote this. I think Katie, the just reading the first read of the play itself was so stunning. And yeah, that's the first of many really wonderful moments. And so obviously, Katie, I'm gonna have to popcorn it over to you then.
Yeah, hi, my name is Katie. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the playwright of this piece. And it was really impactful to see the production process up close, since I'm super new to theater and drama, and I've never got to see production and rehearsals and table work and be a part of that. And it was just so cool to see the collaborative process on that. And everyone was so amazing on it. And yeah. I'll popcorn it off to Melody.
Hello, I'm Melody. She, her pronouns. I am the stage manager of this production. Very privileged to be working on this. The takeaway, I think it was such a blessing to be in community with everybody involved, especially during these pandemic times and what is happening recently, especially with the Asian American community, and just to have this space to be creative with so many like talented, wonderful folks. That's about it. I'm gonna pass it to Makoto.
What's up, everybody? I'm Makoto. I play Grandpa, and I use he/him pronouns. And something that was impactful. There were many things that were very memorable and impactful, and just picking out of the hat, one of them would be that just making art during this time is very on a very basic level. It's been a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of incredibly boring in my life. Not here. Incredibly boring and tedious Zoom meetings and Zoom hangouts and happy hours, and just like, sometimes it's a little sad, or sometimes it's a lot of it sad. But this room and creating this in this way brought me so much joy in a way that I wasn't anticipating from a Zoom meetings and Zoom rehearsals, and yeah, that's gonna stay with me for a while. So I think everyone, tip my hat to all here and all supporters. I'm gonna hand it off. So many lovely people. Kimmy, you're up.
Alrighty. Hi everyone. I'm Kimi, Kimie. My pronouns are she, her. I played May Lee in Katie's incredible piece. I think, oh my gosh, there's so much that was like impactful. I think I had this moment where we were doing table work and I was reading some of my lines and I was like, this is almost verbatim stuff that I have said. about the melting pot and our experiences in that falsehood that exists. And I was like, this person has put it out so beautifully in a cohesive and complete story, and I think that was really excellent. So thank you so much, Katie, for that experience. I'm gonna popcorn to Amy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amy. I use she and they pronouns, and I played Esther in Katie's piece. Um, a lot of things really have stuck with me through this. I got to read one of the very first drafts that Katie wrote back in the beginning of COVID times, and being able to see it grow has been such a wonderful thing, especially with so many lovely people. But I think I was promoting this to some people that I knew, and I was like, hey, if you posted an infographic about, anti-Asian hate crimes but done nothing else, the least you could do is reserve a ticket and like pay some money, because I feel like this piece does a very good job educating people who may not really know about anti-Asian racism in this country, but written in such a lovely way. Um, yeah, I'm gonna popcorn to Lucas.
Hi, friends. My name is Lucas. My pronouns are they and them. I'm the sound designer and audio engineer on this production. And there was a lot that was impactful about this. I mean, my first read of the play, it's a gorgeous piece. I think it really lays everything out really, really strongly, and it does that while also being a really fun read, which I think is really hard to do. And more personally impactful, I mean, one, I'm really grateful to be a part of this room. This is the first production I've been a part of since quarantine started. And this room is like the coolest people that I think could have made this piece together. It was a really, really lovely time. I'm really glad that I was asked to be a part of it. And it was, I think recording over Zoom is a really unique, challenging thing, especially when all of us are used to making stage plays. And I think having a great attitude throughout that process is a really special thing that I don't know how many people outside of the room of people that made this play, I haven't done any other shows this year, but I was really blown away by like just the attitudes and energy that people brought to the room each day. And I'm going to popcorn to David.
Thanks, Lucas. My name is David Pika. I use he, him pronouns. I portrayed ensemble members of this production. Impactful to me. It's a huge privilege to be a part of this production and this process. The group is near and dear to my heart. And to throw it back onto like focuses on Katie writing such an incredible play. Katie sees this country, absolutely sees this country, and has written a piece that really puts it on the page. I think my favorite moment in the play, I'd shared it with Kimmy, but it's Katie's line where May, after an act of violence against her, defends the next generation and protects the next generation as best she can by saying Mama was dancing, as opposed to I was just targeted. There's something profoundly beautiful about that, and that several generations have had to do. Yeah, like, whew. Well done, Katie. Who am I passing this to? Marissa.
Hello.
I'm Marissa Kennedy. My pronouns are she, her, and I was the narrator and the 2020 newscaster for pandemic. And I would say the most impactful part of this whole process was actually learning more about Chinese American history. Um, we don't we don't really talk about it that much, and I was really blessed by this experience to learn more. And there are moments that I could absolutely relate, and there are moments where I could empathize, and there are moments where my mind was just blown, and I felt like I grew through this new knowledge. So that was it's amazing. And Katie did a wonderful job, I think, of introducing that. And um, I wish everyone could see the script and the way that it was written and the through lines of present day and the past, because you could really see how things have changed, but how things are sadly still the same, and where we as a society still need to grow. Um, so I'm going to popcorn this to Brendan.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Really happy to be here. My name is Brendan. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns, and I was the 1930s newsreader for this production. The most impactful thing for me was I would agree with Marissa that taking the opportunity to really immerse myself and learn about historical facts and culture that I didn't know as much about was really powerful for me. We had a lot of amazing work done by our dramaturg, and I also really enjoyed our dialect coach coming in and giving us a lot of context for the transatlantic voices that you hear in the 1930s scenes was a lot of fun. And I think just having a space to have these tough conversations in a supportive environment. We talked a lot about some of the scenes having some really yucky moments, and being able to work through them and talk about them among artists that are so giving and caring and wonderful, I think was a really powerful, impactful experience for me. So thank you all for all of your amazing work, and thank you, Katie, for giving us the opportunity to talk about this and to bring it to the world.
And
Yes, and I'm going to pass it off. Speaking of dramaturg, I'll pass it off to Liana.
Well, now the surprise of who I am is kind of ruined, but yes, I am Liana Irvin, she, her, hers. I'm on Lenny Lenape Land, and I am so happy to have been the dramaturg for Pandemic. My first read of this play was Chinese lady better watch out. And then the second kind of thought that kind of passed my mind was how after the whole trending fake news things that were happening, like how news in itself is its performance, and like how performance has like changed but also kind of stayed the same, and in that same vein of like the way that hatred is disseminated. And yeah, I just thought that Katie handled that so well, and the way that we came together and kind of chomped on this was a really enriching process. I do have a bird. He's singing.
Opening night celebration singing. Yes, thank you all of you for sharing your thoughts and insights, because I think that already has made this a really rich conversation. And speaking of the dramaturgy and Liana's amazing work, especially since our first question is going to be about the history. If you didn't notice, when you go to the ticket landing page, there's a slideshow that Liana has prepared, which also links out to some great resources. So for those of you who have mentioned so far in the chat that the history has really opened up things for you, there's some places that you can go to dig deeper and further that are available for you. So please do check that out. And speaking of our first question, Katie, did you know the history of the immigration policies that impacted Chinese Americans prior to starting this story? Or did you learn about this history through creating the backstory of the grandfather? Asked with a thanks for creating such a great piece.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I originally only had a very basic knowledge of the whole Chinese exclusion period and the yellow peril era, and all that history. I felt like it's not a huge part of the American education curriculum, which is unfortunate in like my schooling. So I only had a very basic knowledge from my education. So to research for the play, I had to do a lot of research with asking personal family members. Both of my parents are immigrants, so I asked about their experiences. I asked my my grandparents, and I did a lot of research online into looking into the stories of those who lived in the Chinese exclusion period and absorbing all of that super interesting and not taught enough information helped with the creation.
Amazing. Thank you. And yes, audience, this is the moment that if you have additional questions, you can either give me a hand raise or if you'd like to type them in the chat. Another offering I give you, audience, is if you had a reaction and response, if you think forward to 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, what is a moment from the piece that will stick with you, that will make you think, perhaps have you go digging deeper onto a different path? You can offer those moments as well. And my panelists, my cast and crew, if someone shouts out a moment that you'd like to speak to and we're in a moment of silence in between questions, yeah, absolutely, please add to the conversation that way. So I'm gonna silence myself for a second and allow people to think and type. And creative team, if there's anything that you want to add based on what's been put in the room so far, you're welcome to take space and do that.
Hey, Mandy, I have a question for someone in the panel. Do you think now is the time to ask that while we're kind of letting some questions brew and stuff?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Great. This is for Lucas and slash cat. Lucas, I want to know what this experience of recording and taking all this material and all the different takes that we all did, and like, yeah, like, what'd you do? How'd you do it? How did you make decisions, or how do you and Kat make decisions about how things, kind of get pieced together? Of course, the script is, the play is in an order.
Right.
But you want to talk on that? I'm super curious.
Sure. Mindy, is it cool if we do that now? Okay, cool. Yeah. So one, obviously the script is the script. So that is a thing. But from the amount of takes that we took, I think the first and foremost, like going through and just like kind of like scrubbing to see what was like useful, is that like, because we recorded this over Zoom, there was a lot of internet glitches and small random sounds or cutouts or things like that that happened, which like unfortunately automatically disqualify most content, just for clarity's sake. Which I'm grateful that none of my Kimmy's cat. There was some motorcycles. There was a lovely South Philly fight that was very apparent in the recording. And yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that none of those moments happened under like what I would certainly, and what I hope Kat would agree with, were like our favorite takes, both like in terms of clarity and like emotional content. I think we really got lucky with that. And Amy, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was just the panelist, but Amy, I got you. And yeah, I think that it starts with like, honestly, just listening to every act, all 3 takes, and cutting and highlighting what I think worked best out of that. And then arranging that into a coherent, full thing. And that work, I think, is fun, but also just incredibly tedious. It's listening to the same show 9 times, essentially. And with no underlying sound happening. It's just listening to like, y'all do your jobs, which is great. But it's very repetitive. And then following that, we got into the fun part, which is like all the environment stuff, the music transitions, and Kat and I worked pretty closely on that. Kat, I think I would love to bounce this off you, honestly, if you don't mind, in terms of like, I guess just for transparency, like I essentially went through and made a first take and a first draft of the whole show. And we did, I think, 3 versions of revisions with a note session in between each of those. And, you know, normally a director and sound designer gets to work in the same room for that, which unfortunately couldn't happen this time. So we FaceTimed, which was lovely. And Kat, yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about kind of like the note session and like revision period. I think that'd be useful.
Yeah, for sure. Lucas got to watch me eat my dinner a lot, mostly. But yeah, I think particularly in terms of like listening for other takes earlier this year, I worked on another kind of like pre-recorded production, but it was more of a movie style thing. But it's not a movie. I don't know what we're making right now. Anyway, but something I learned from that production was like, as you're going through your script, for capture and recording, take note of the takes that you liked best, just so you can have like an imprint of things for like particularly important lines. So in listening to Lucas's first take, I had a script that kind of had things being like, I think the second take might work here. I think the third might work. And if something in listening felt off, I was able to go back to my script and be like, oh, okay, cool. There was a different, there's a different take of that might work. And sometimes it wouldn't be the exact tape in my script. Usually a lot of the notes for Lucas were like, I think there's a different one. I'm not sure where it is yet. And a lot of those notes, kind of the take notes came gradually throughout the process, because there was so much to take in terms of sound and world building, which Lucas did really beautifully. The big listen for me for takes and timing was actually between the second to last draft and the final draft. And so I listened for takes, but I was also listening a lot for rhythm of the piece. There's a wonderful advantage to working in an audio medium where if a pause is too long, you can make it shorter. So I want to thank Lucas for going through for the final pass of notes, for doing a lot of tedious work in, hey, can you like tighten this moment up? There were a lot of those notes in the final pass. And in part that was because in rehearsal, something I realized that like was wonderful was like for this really incredible cast to get to the places that they needed. There was a real gift of like being able to take your time and like be able to be really clear about the intentions that you're having, because we have this gift of being able to go back and mold the rhythm a little bit more so it's a bit more exacting. And that was really wonderful. We didn't change the rhythm of the whole play by any means, just like punching up what was already there. But that was some of the other like specifically voices and lines work that happened.
And sorry, there was a question in the chat that got asked after I finished too. I use Reaper. It's a DAW that I love a lot. I started using it like 3 or 4 years ago because of a really nerdy reason in terms of multi-channel exporting that I get really excited about. I'm happy to talk about it more when we have more time to talk about that. Yeah, I use Reaper. It's a great program. Check it out. And I had a thought on the last thing Kat was saying, but it's gone now, so I apologize for that. I will hit the chat if it comes back to me.
Thank you. And Katie, we had a question for you. How did the experience of making a radio play instead of a stage play change your original ideas for this piece?
So originally the play was a very visual experience. So the play was physically split into halves. So on the left side, it was the 1930s stage, and on the right side, it was the modern day stage, and the sides would light up for the different scenes, for the different time periods. And that was my original plan with it. And when I heard it was going to be a radio play, it was super interesting to adapt that to be a more audible experience. So we kind of took out the visual aspect and like the directional aspect of the script, and we added more, we focused more on exposition and how you can create, how you can basically tell an audience what the character is doing without having to show them. So that, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of thinking about what kind of sound effects we're going to use, what kind of music to really create an immersive sound experience. And yeah, so that's kind of how it changed as we changed it to a radio play.
Awesome. And there was one more question for you and audience members before I ask this. We have about time for one last question as we start to head into just general final reflections. But Katie, can you talk about how the scholarship and research, what kind of growth or discovery did you have during that process, and how that might have impacted um, what play you decided to write or how that story came out?
Yeah, so as I said before, I had a very limited knowledge of the Chinese exclusion and just the history of prejudice against the Asian population in America. And I would say it definitely made me um, way more, I would say, appreciative, and also it just was really inspiring to see how Asian people endured in those times and how they persevered in those really bleak and exclusive times, and how my family has basically come here today. So it was um, yeah, it was really insightful to see it from that perspective as a person and as a Chinese American in this country. And the vision of the play expanded with the research, as in, I wasn't sure how I was going to compare these, how I was going to relate these two women. So I knew I wanted to relate a young lady from the modern day, and a young woman from the early times, but I didn't know how I wanted to make them connected. And as I was researching how Chinese families especially remained in the exclusion period, and like different, how they had, how they got married and how they started families in these Chinatowns that were created during those times, how they basically forged papers to reunite with their loved ones. And learning that, I wanted to connect the two characters relatively. So Esther is the not the the great granddaughter of May, and that kind of took on a new life as I was researching all of these stories of Chinese immigrants and their descendants.
Thank you. And related, I want to shout out an earlier comment that happened in the chat. It's noteworthy that separating children from parents is a long time enduring pattern here. The Africans, the First Nations, the Asians, the Central and South American refugees. And not speaking for the commenter, but speaking for myself, Katie, in your play, you opened up a whole nother instance of that I had no idea had existed in our history. And when it speaks to a larger pattern like that, I really want to thank you again, as so many people are saying, thank you so much for writing this play. And we're going to end with this question because I think it's beautiful. It opens it up to the full cast. Can you speak to, can the playwright and cast discuss this generational divide and what it suggests about feeling like one belongs in America? So the commenter highlighted that the grandfather has a more hopeful view, even though he entered a hate crime, and Esther has a bit more pessimistic view. So if anyone wants to open up and talk a little bit about generational perspectives, that will be our final question before we close out.
That's what I was gonna actually point out earlier in things that stick with me was Grandpa's very uh, optimistic view, and Esther being someone who's sort of just figuring out how to navigate these emotions. And I feel like for me personally, it's always one of the two on any given day at any time. Which is, it's been very interesting for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people feel the same way, but the fact that there is the grandfather who still remains so optimistic um, has really stuck with me, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot for the past few weeks. But I'm curious to know what everyone else thinks about it.
I'd like to share a quick thought that I have about it. Having played Grandpa and having to often, consider it as a point of view, which is not that far away from my point of view, or the way my perspective on a lot of things. And the thing that I want to share about it is what I'm starting to understand now, which is what I'm starting to what's allowing me to have a framework for understanding a lot of things in my life, and which is the ratio of sort of time lived and time period. And I think I may have mentioned this in a rehearsal because it came up, maybe not, but I remember years ago, my friend, one of my best friends, was had just had a baby, and the baby was 2 or 3 days old. And we were like, I was at their home and we were talking, and I don't know, staring at the baby. And the parents, my friends, were like, isn't it crazy to think, like, this is day three, the first full day three. And so today was 33% of their life. And so whatever happened in that day, that's 33% of the experience of that living being. And then you just multiply that, you just keep going. And like one day isn't 33% the next day, so on and so forth. By the time you're 10 years old, one day is like, just a little tiny incident, a tiny thing. By the time you're 85, it's just a blip, right? Like, as far as percentages, one day is no big deal. One incident, not a big deal in the scope of actual ratio of events that one experiences. And so I wonder, as I'm getting older, I wonder if that kind of is going to be true in my experiences. I'm, a few decades from now, if like an incident that feels like would have been big for me now at this age, and maybe was even bigger 2 decades ago, is if it's going to feel a little less, if it's going to feel a little less heavy. And maybe that kind of relationship between the time and experiences and how it gets, the ratio of all that, maybe like there's, I don't know, here's the optimist in me, but maybe that allows for optimism, maybe that allows for hopeful viewing of the world, when all those incidents and pretty much awful things that happen, they just get smaller and smaller in percentage of your life. I don't have anything, I don't have anything really deep to share beyond that, but that's just like what I think about.
Yeah, I found a lot when I, was talking to my mother, who my mom is white, my dad is Japanese, and my mom grew up in the States, and I would say to her, like, all these terrible things are happening. Like, I feel helpless. I feel like there's nothing I can do. And my mom would talk about how, like, when she was young in the 60s, cities were burning and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, it was so much worse then. And I'm like, great, but that doesn't help me now because I still feel that struggle. So it's difficult for sure to, I, I hope that things hurt less, as Makoto has said, as I age, but I also don't want it to because I want very much to stay present in this ouch and do something about it. So yeah, I don't know if that helped at all.
Thank you all for those responses. And, in a way, they're related to the conversation that's been happening in the chat in response to Kira's question of like, how do you navigate a text when it can have these hurtful moments that are present, that are exchanges that, as some cast members said in the chat, are things that they've dealt with in real life. you know, because this is a very present moment, present experience play. And I just want to shout out what one of the cast members said, which is, and hearken it back to, as all things come full circle, how so many of the production members said that they were grateful for this room and these people. And it was shouted out in the chat that Kat did a lot of work and supporting of the cast and the team to be able to navigate these themes in the way that they deserve to be navigated, but to also protect the individuals in the room at the same time. So I just wanted to pull that out of the chat and name that and celebrate Kat and celebrate all of you. And of course, celebrate Katie, because without Katie, the depth and so many directions that we've gone in just 40 minutes in conversation would not have existed if not for your work. So thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much to the entire cast and crew of Pandemic. And thank you to our audience. It's so great to have had so many of you here on a Friday night talking about this play and this piece, and to hear the impact. So thank you. And please, please spread word about this play. Like Amy said, this is an incredible piece for people to listen to get to know parts of both current events and past history that they may not have any idea about. So thank you all so much, and have a great night.
Thanks, Mindy. If we can, real quick, I was wondering, yeah, I know Kira, Brendan shouted out in the chat that like as we close out our rehearsals in order to like red balloon what we worked with at the end of the day away. So I wonder if we want to close with the breath for the talkback that we use throughout the process.
Yes.
I'm a little sentimental.
Yes,
but I
please.
have a chance to do it with the cast again. So if folks who are participating want to follow along, you want to start with your hands closed. And if you inhale, and exhale, and then give yourself a hug. Eli Lind, who helped come up with this, who's a really great artist, said this is how you can kind of pretend you're hugging someone in the room with you when you can't have physical contact these days. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for that ritual and sharing it with us, Kat. Good night, everybody.